Hi, thank you for joining me today. It's Geraldine from the Paper Puffin Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to make this window card. It opens like this, and then this flap folds down, and it allows you to display some of your favorite designer series paper. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get started. Let's begin by reviewing all of the pieces you'll need to make this card. For your base, you're going to need a full sheet of cardstock measuring 8.5 inches by 11. And you'll need 4 pieces of designer series paper of your choice. Each one is cut at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. For this card, I'm using the Honey Bee Stamp Set Bundle, which is a retired set from Stampin' Up. I cut out the hive using the die cut, and I stamped the large bee and 2 small bees. I colored the bees and cut them out using the die cut. I also have gone ahead and prepared the stitched rectangle dies that are going to act as the mats and the places that I'm going to put the sentiments and the images. I cut a gold one and a white one in the size 4 inches by 2 5/8, and then I went ahead and cut 2 white pieces, each measuring 3 5/8 by 2 1/4. You can choose any of these types of shapes that you like. Ovals would be nice, or circles as well. Now for the scoring and the cutting. So I'm taking my 1 full sheet of cardstock, and I'm going to be scoring it down the middle on the long edge and on the short edge. So for the long edge, I'll line up at 5.5 inches and score. And then on the short edge, I'll line up at 4 1/4. And score. Now this card ends up having 3 panels, so I'm going to be cutting away this panel over here. So I'm going to line up my paper with the 8.5 inch edge at the top, lining it up again at 4 1/4, and the score line will be my guide. I'll cut this score line down to the intersection, so cutting down to 5.5 inches. Now I'm going to turn my paper and line it up at 5.5 inches. And I'm going to cut away this bottom panel. So I'm going to cut up from the bottom until I get to the intersection. And that allows me to remove this panel. Now I have the 3 panels that I need, and I'm ready to burnish and fold along those score lines. Now just for a little tip, when I'm folding up this bottom panel, sometimes I find that when I fold it up, this front panel doesn't fold over nicely. So I go in and I just cut a tiny piece away from down here using my trimmer, a very small piece, so that when the card folds up, it folds up neatly. Now I want to assemble the front panel first because I'm going to be cutting a window out of that panel. So with my orientation of my paper like this, I'm going to close up this panel, which will be the front panel, and I'm going to be attaching this piece of designer series paper to the front. When I attach it, I'm only going to place glue along this outside edge because I know I'm going to be using a die cut to cut the window out. I'll go ahead and glue this on, and we'll pick up there. Now I'm placing my rectangular stitched die on the front panel. I'm using these little post-it tabs to help keep it in place because I want to try to center it the best I can. I don't usually measure, I just eyeball it. Now when I'm running this through my die cutting machine, a tip would be fold this piece up, and then when you place it through your die cutting machine, just have it slanted a little. You'll find that your die cutting machine doesn't struggle as much to cut out this die if you have it entering first as a small portion and not this full part here. I'll go ahead and do that and we'll pick up there. Now that I've run this through the die cutting machine, and I only ran this portion through and then ran it back, I can take away this front piece here and save that for another project. And then this piece on the inside will now act as the mat for one of these panels, which we'll get to in a moment. Now I'm going to attach this piece of designer series paper, and this is the piece that you'll see is on the inside of this front flap. I'll go ahead and glue this in place and then pick up there. Now I'm ready to glue the piece that we cut out of this window in place here. But to make sure that it's perfectly lined up, I'll close the front panel. I've already got some glue on the back, and I'll place it exactly where I want it in that window so that it lines up nicely. Then I'll move this front panel out of the way and attach this piece. I'll go ahead now and flip this open and glue in place the other pieces of designer series paper that I want on these two panels. Now those pieces are glued in place. A gentle reminder that remember when you trimmed a tiny piece off here, if you needed to, that you still have to fit this designer series paper in place. That's why this piece had to be trimmed ever so slightly. So now I'm ready to go ahead and do the stamping and place those mats in place for this card. To help with lining up where I want this gold mat to go, I use the window as well as a guide. It just helps you to line it up nice and neatly. And place that in place. And I've gone ahead and stamped the image and the sentiment I want, and those will get attached here. The larger piece of the white paper I'm going to have to eyeball down here, so I'll go ahead and glue that in place and put the images that I want on here, and then I'm ready to do the front panel. You can see now that all of the mats and the images and sentiments are in place, everything except for the bees, which are going to go on last along with the embellishments. I'll attach the bees and some embellishments. I'm choosing to use some of these brushed metallic dots, and I'll also use some Wink of Stella to give some sparkle to the bees' wings. I'll go ahead and finish up the card and show you the finished product. And here we have the finished card. It opens like this and this. I also went ahead and decorated the envelope a little with the designer series paper that I used. So I just put some on the back flap, placing some glue on the flap of the envelope, the designer series paper over top, and then trimming away the excess. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.